TG.
Well, thank you. I have such a lovely studio audience. They are just so generous. Well, you guys, now come on. This is our fourth show. We're so excited to be broadcasting tonight here on Wednesday evenings at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on LNR Radio. And our wonderful producer, Christopher Taylor, is in the background helping us make sure that the show goes smoothly tonight. We have a jam-packed show tonight. We have a wonderful guest sidekick tonight, author Mark Bennett, and a very special friend of mine since childhood is going to be our featured guest this evening, Ted Mayberry. He's a chemist from Columbus, Ohio, and we're going to be talking about addiction. So it's going to be just a jam-packed evening, some fun time, and some interesting, serious talk as well, because, you know, sometimes we got to be serious. I know. It's unlike me, but I'm going to be. And speaking of serious, you know, I'm sure you're aware of what's happening in the news, if you're paying attention to what's going on in the world. A lot of concerns with what's happening in Syria right now in terms of the use of chemical weapons on its people, and seeing that the United States and some of our coalition forces are looking to perhaps get involved in that particular part of the world. So keep your eyes and ears peeled on what's happening there. And if you're not aware of it, today is the 50th anniversary of the I Have a Dream speech by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And an interesting fact about that speech that I didn't realize is that I Have a Dream was not written into the speech itself. That was something that he said in impromptu, extemporaneously, during the speech itself, something that came from his heart. And I find that particular impromptu moment, that just is what defined that particular speech. And sometimes it's those unexpected things that just come from our heart or from our gut that are the most memorable moments in our lives. So with that in mind, I'm going to bring on our, you know what? I can't bring on our sidekick if I don't know he's there. I hope that he's not late. Well, I think that might be our guest sidekick. Let's go to the door and see if it is. Let's see. Mark, is that you? Oh, he's being very quiet. Mark, is that you?
Michael Taylor Gray, you look absolutely fabulous.
Oh, well, thank you, Mark. Cue the music.
You.
Wow. That's my show band. Okay, enjoy.
Oh,
ladies.
Holy cow.
Oh, Mark, our studio audience has been to having you on.
It was so hot today.
How hot? Oh, I am just delighted to have you on the show tonight, because like I was saying earlier in the opening about the I Have a Dream speech, it's those impromptu moments that sometimes are the most unexpected and the most life-altering moments that we have in our life. And for you, relating to why you and I are speaking tonight, it relates to the book that you published, The Big Show, and the friendship that you started with Fred de Cordova, and how that started. So what was the impromptu moment that happened?
Well, it was kind of funny because I was just like everybody else, a graduate of a performing arts school that you know very well, and I lucked out on little bit parts. And and I was doing a lot of shows on the NBC lot. It was a day on Days of Our Lives, and then a day on Santa Barbara, and then a day on Saved by the Bell, which I still get residual checks for, which is strange. Anyway, but I had grown up.
Let me pause just for a moment, and I'm going to let everybody know, and that today is no less, Mark is no less than he was at that time. And part of the reason Mark was booking all those shows is not only because he's magnificently talented, but boy, it's easy on the eye. I mean, it's Mark Bennett, two N's and two T's, because he is totally tasty. He is 2 times the man you'll ever have in your life. He is fabulous. So that in mind, Mark, may continue telling us a little bit what you're saying.
Thank you, Michael. I so appreciate that. That made my night.
Thank you. Some of Mark's friends in the audience tonight. Go ahead.
I brought them all in. So, but because I was such a Tonight Show fan, just like anybody, who grew up with him, I wanted to get to Studio One, and whenever there was a break, like a lunch break or whatever, I didn't care. I would sneak over to Studio One. And the crew didn't seem to mind because I would go right at the camera rehearsal for the bands. And, being a musician, too, it was like, going to school again and watching the pros do their thing, Sting and Gloria Estefan, The Temptations, and, Stevie Ray Vaughan and, all that stuff. So the crew didn't mind because I would just go sit, listen, and leave, I didn't schmooze. I wasn't into the handshake or, all that. I just wanted to watch the pros. But I had done that enough where eventually I would, get to know some people or whatever, and they'd want to know who I am. And, oh, you're on the lot. Oh, okay. So as long as I was on the lot, that's all right. And after many times of doing this, because then it was like, hey, Mark, you got to check out, this band, the Doobie Brothers or whatever it is. I would come over, and this one particular day, and I think it was the Stevie Ray Vaughan day, and we actually, you can't do this anymore in today's world, but I actually jammed with Stevie Ray Vaughan before he did his rehearsal with his band, which was a real treat.
Wow. Really?
Yeah.
I mean, you sat down at the piano and just...
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. Don't you wish you had that on tape?
Oh, my gosh. If we had the cell phones and the Blackberries,
right?
I mean, if we had that stuff, please. But I think it was a crew member and said, hey, Mark, why don't you play? Because the piano was out, but the pianist wasn't there. So I looked at him and I said, he goes, what do you want to play? And actually, you've got a show about addictions. He was newly sober at the time. And I said, well, why don't we play Amazing Grace? And he says, that sounds perfect. And so anyway, we did this real slow blues.
The audience is very appreciative. Some of them are also are sober as well. So we did a very slow bluesy version of Amazing Grace, and of course Stevie Ray Vaughan just you went to church when you listened to him play. So anyway, that particular day I stepped down, of course, watching the band rehearse, and it was loud and crazy, doing Voodoo Child, Jimi Hendrix, and it was crazy. And that's when I saw Fred Cordova for the first time walk out. And I saw him stop a stage manager while the music's playing, and he's smoking. You could do that then. He's old Hollywood, the glasses, kind of a symphony in beiges, I could say. I love it.
And he was pointing to me, though, and that's what was alarming. And I didn't realize all that time that it was a closed set. It was just sort of the good graces of the crew, but I wasn't supposed to be there at all. Anyway, so it's starting to sink in, and then as the music's playing, I see the stage manager walk off backstage. Fred starts making a beeline to me, and this is when I'm going, oh my God, visitation hours are over forever.
That's right. You're not family or family.
And I'm getting kicked out by the main guy, right?
Yeah.
Not security.
Oh, no. By the 25-year-plus producer over time of the Night Show with Johnny Carson. Yes.
The main man. Yeah, the main man.
Yeah.
So he's got the cigarette. He's walking toward me. The music's blaring. The music stops. He comes right up to me, and I'm starting to get a little nervous. And he kind of leans in, and he goes, excuse me. And I pop up out of my seat, and I put out my hand. I go, yes, Mr. DeCordova, because I wanted him to know I knew who he was.
That's
and he goes, tell me. He says, tell me something. And I went, yeah. And then he looks over to the band. Then he looks back at me. And then he kind of gestures back to the band. He goes, is this good?
I love it.
And
I love it.
I smiled, and I felt a little relieved, and I said something snarky like, odds are favorable with the viewers. And he goes, they're not warming up or anything, are they? I said, no, that's a real song.
That's the warm-up. Yeah, that's an actual song.
They're not warming up.
They're not playing scales.
So in this quick moment, in this quick exchange, it was sort of a moment where the crew saw Fred talk to me. Okay, I'm not an axe murderer, someone crazy. All right, I've met you now. Okay, and I'll probably be seeing you again. I just wanted to make sure. And, just sort of sending a message throughout, like, oh, he's okay. He can stay. That kind of thing. And that was it.
That's where it all began.
That's where it all began, and it was totally Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Do you remember what year that was?
That was 1990, February of 1990.
You've met him in February of 1990, and then Fred passed away from this.
Actually, this is actually April or May. That's it. April or May of 1990. That's it.
So in the spring, early summer of 1990, and then Fred passed away on September 15th in 2001. So you got to spend a good 10, 11 years with him, getting to know him and become a very good friend with him. So
yes and no. I mean, I never worked for Carson, but I did do things for the talent coordinators and stuff. And I knew him, in that casual, quippy kind of way, and so forth. And anytime I went there, then it was like, I wonder if I'm going to bump into Fred, because it was always funny. And then the longer it went on, it was, he'd say, "What is this grunge nonsense anyway?" Talking to the kid, what is this? What is this? So, but by the time then Carson retired, he had a deal for life, I guess, at NBC because of 25 years with The Tonight Show, and had consulting obligations with Spreaker.
Yeah, not to mention his legendary, career prior to that in Hollywood and film as well.
Yes, I mean, hugely. Yeah. I mean, he hit TV on the ground running with Jack Benny producing and directing that, and producing and directing the Brenton Allen Show. But before that, it was 10 years at Universal as a director, and then before that, it was 10 years at Warner Brothers. His first movie was as a dialogue director in Mildred Pierce in 1946.
Which was the one Academy Award that Joan Crawford won. She was nominated 3 times overall. She won for Mildred Pierce, which was a script that Betty Davis turned down.
Yeah, that is very good. Michael.
The is great. Well, I know that because I did a play called Bitch Slap when I played Joan Crawford. so be impressed how you won. Those are some of my lines in the play.
I, however, did not.
Right. Well, I don't know, but like my audience appreciates all that Hollywood. Thank you. They had to check and Google all of the information to make sure it was true before they applauded. So
this is true.
Let's go ahead and promote your book. It's called The Big Show, and people can get it at markbennettauthor.com. Remember, that's Bennett with 2 N's and 2 T's, markbennettauthor.com. And I'm going to read the synopsis because I think it's a great way to sort of really give people a good idea of who you are at this time of your life and the relationship and why Fred became such an important part of your life. So here goes.
Okay. Thank you,
Is there
Michael.
someone... Oh, you're welcome. I'll be right back with you. Is there someone you can point to when you were just starting out that invited you to take a risk and said, "Hey, kid, let me show you how it's done"? Then did you take that risk? Were you willing to try something new, something that would force you to stretch and grow? Did you take that empty-handed leap into the void? Author Mark Bennett, don't you like hearing that? Author Mark Bennett did, and he shares that leap with you in The Big Show. Mark takes you along as an unlikely partnership with legendary television producer Fred de Cordova has them navigating the maze that is Hollywood on a quest to sell a series of variety concept specials. From the then NBC Productions to ABC Entertainment, this newcomer opens closed doors and leads you on a backstage tour through the murky waters of the television industry. Mark gives readers first-hand how-tos from the legend Fred de Cordova, how-tos that apply to life outside the entertainment world as well. Always mindful that in show business most things fail, Fred de Cordova's insights into why some shows take the world by storm and while others end up gathering dust is priceless. And Fred knows a little something about television shows, having directed and or produced more than 500 shows, including 25 years executive producing The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson. Fred won 5 Emmys for his work on the show. And Fred once said, "Mark Bennett speaking fondly about me? Tell him to stop." Luckily for all of us, Mark did not stop it. He did not stop it. And you now have an opportunity to learn a little extra about Fred de Cordova and discover how a teacher and a student became soulmates. I think that's a great introduction to who you are and about the book. I think that's a great I love the synopsis that you put in there because I think it's a really great selling point for the book, and it really it grabbed my interest as the fact that we spoke just several days ago, and while we were talking I bought the book online.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it came 2 days later, and I read it, in the same day, and I just loved it. It's such a it's such a warm hug. You describe in the book at one point a hug that you got from Fred. I think when you guys, got the production deal together, it was just one of those moments, and it was very special to you. And to me, that's what the book is. It's one of those. It's really a lovely tribute to him, and quite a lesson for anybody who wants to know how challenging it is to take an idea and get it on air.
Yeah. And he knew as well as anybody else, and he didn't do the whole mentee thing. He wasn't that guy. So it was it was a lot of a why me, kind of thing. And he always, I'm from the Midwest, and when you're from the Midwest, you always have that third eye looking down at you. And it's like, am I really having this conversation? Am I really in this situation? Am I really talking to that person?
Yeah, right. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. Yeah. Now. Would you like us to read? Would you like me to read an excerpt from the book?
I would love it, and I would not only love to hear it, but if anybody has written anything, the biggest treat, it almost chokes you up. In fact, most times it does, is because you've been writing this thing and you rewrite it, and it's been in your brain with your voice, and that's all you hear. So it's a real treat always to hear somebody else read something that I wrote so long ago.
Well, I loved being read to as a child, so it's one of my great. No, it's not that you're a kid, but you do have a very boyish face. But it's wonderful, and I love encouraged reading. That's why normally I do read an excerpt, which I will tonight as well, at the end of our show. It's called Tail Ends, and I'm going to read something that I wrote from G-Man magazine, which was a digital magazine that that OMTG's producer also created, and I was a contributing writer. I had a section that was on food and humor, so it was like real food or metaphorical food, and so my article is about friends as soul food. So I thought that was an appropriate bookend to the book that you've written about your relationship with Fred de Cordova. So
that's great.
So prepare for this little moment, this magical moment, and we're going to read a little excerpt from The Big Show. Once again, available at www.markbennettauthor.com. Here it goes. Most things fail. Most books, most albums, most films, most television shows, and even some really good ideas. Don't lose sight of your hopeful result, but don't focus on it. Remember that. Fred de Cordova. I didn't know if there was a producer's school, but if there ever was an expert on the how-tos of show business, any medium, all roads would point to Fred de Cordova. As fickle as the entertainment industry can be, fleeting for both successes and failures alike, Fred received a check every week from somewhere for 68 years. Tough record to break. Florin Ziegfeld, the Schuberts, not the organization, the brothers, Jack Warner, Carl Laemmle, Burns and Allen, Jack Benny, and Johnny Carson, to name a few. He knew Fanny Bryce and Josephine Baker. He discovered Sid Caesar, Imogene Coca, Jackie Gleason, and Danny Kaye. Imagine then how I felt. The first I saw on a piece of paper, Fred de Cordova and Mark Bennett pre-approved as executive producers. Or as Fred said, you will alarm many people. Believe me, I was first in line when it came to the word alarmed. There he was, though, my teacher, my confidant, my partner and friend. I was grateful for every moment. My first day at the then NBC Productions was the result of Fred taking a gamble and going to bat for me. He, without my knowledge, nor did he ever bring it up any time thereafter, basically closed the deal. Sure, I had an agent, but Fred got me the office, right next to his. Earlier that week, I saw him standing on the Tonight Show set where the monologue takes place. Fred shouts, "Did you hear the news?" "I'm always the last to know," I counter. He makes a motion for me to come closer. In an instant, all the hustle, noise, and activity that go into a nightly talk show vanishes. Fred quietly gestures the parameters of my deal and with typical poignancy declares, "You should be very proud of yourself. People have been walking around this town for years trying to do what you're doing right now. You have an idea, you put it to paper, and now someone is paying you to do something about that idea. You got it." Fred opens his arms, and I receive from him the biggest hug. Then, with a whisper, a look in the eye, and a fatherly pat on the cheek, he adds, You should be very happy and know that I will be with you every step of the way. A real movie moment. And when I look back, he still gave me the credit. Kenneth Tynan once wrote, Fred de Cordova has an engulfing handshake that is a contract in itself, complete with small print and an option for renewal on both sides. A hug must mean you get a long life in syndication. For now, at the point of innocence, the adventure had just started. I mean, Mark, it's so lovely, you know. It's just, and I'm looking forward to reading it again. And I really hope that you have tremendous success with this book. And like I know that you said, tell us the timeline of how long this book had been sitting, the manuscript, and what got it actually to get published at this time.
Well, 12 years ago, it was after Fred's funeral, and I was talking with his wife, widow, Janet de Cordova, and she was saying, you should write about your experiences. You're barely out of college. You knew all these people, da-da-da-da-da. And I was like, wow, that's a good idea. You really should, and I'm here to help you if you need it, and, you know, all this wonderful stuff. So the big show was born. And I threw it everywhere. I mean, Johnny Carson read it, actually.
Wow.
And, it went to New York. And, somebody said, oh, I know this agent in New York. Just, let me send it here. And the publicist that I had back when Fred and I were working together, he's in New York, and he graciously read it and said, can I send this to my friend Jan Wenner of Rolling Stone magazine?
What was your response that you got? What was the response you got from Rolling Stone?
Well, the response was that he liked. Jan Wenner said to Joe, "I like it, but it's the kind of piece that we used to do 30 years ago." So, no Rolling Stone.
What
it was
quality pieces? What? Really? I don't get that kind of response, but wow.
Well, no commentary on that. It's just the magazine industry is smaller, So they're not doing the big pieces like they used to do in the 70s and so forth. So anyway, but it went everywhere. Fred friends read it, and I remember Ray Stark read it. It's just like all these Fred people, whatever. And what I got was a gentleman who read it, and he said, oh, God, I wish this was my life. And he was a partner in a small little industry magazine. So he did like 3 excerpts in it. And I was like, well, that's it. And I was fine with that. It was great, and thank you. And put it away. And that sat in my closet for 10 years. And then a friend of mine, and for all the people I've met through the 90s and the 2000s and all the Fred friends and all the presidents and all those kinds of people that knew about it, read it, or whatever, and it's someone that I knew when I was 19 years old, my first year at California Institute of the Arts, and it was brought up that I had written a script, and I said in passing it was adapted on a manuscript I wrote many, many years ago. And she said, she liked the script, but she said, do you have a manuscript? And I went, well, yeah. And she said, well, I want to read that. And I said, well, I'm going to have to dig for it. And sure enough, I had to go into a closet, and there's a stack of paper, and I'm going through all the loose paper, and I found what I thought was pretty much the whole thing. Gave it to her, she read it, she liked it, she goes, I want to give this to a publisher. And I'm like, you do? And she said, yeah. And I went, well, okay, but I had to make it digital again.
Right.
And then I sent it to her. She sent it to her publisher, and that was on a Monday. He read it on a Monday night. Tuesday morning, he said yes, and Wednesday I had a contract.
Wow. That's just amazing. I mean, I love it because as we were talking in our conversation the other day after I read the book, I said, I'm looking at the back of the book. I said, this is fresh off the presses. It's made in the USA, which I love, Charleston, South Carolina, August 22nd, 2013. I'm like, wow, that's 6 days ago. I love this. Is hot off the presses, people. Yeah. So it's just amazing. Everything in its time. And I just think, good for you. And that's Fred giving you another hug. This book coming out.
I think so.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's
so
just
it's just kind of, the old 12 years for the overnight success kind of thing. But I was grateful that her name is Mary Louise Gemmel, and that she saw the potential in it and the sellability of it, and that's nice. And the publisher really genuinely understood Fred and his humor and the caring between the two of us and how unusual it was, and I was just I'm grateful to the both of them for really helping the big show see the light of day and get to release it into the world. It's been really unexpected.
Absolutely, and it's those unexpected moments that are sometimes the most rewarding. So I really, really hope that the big show ends up being a big show. And it's crossed our paths together again, which I'm just thrilled about. So, and I'm so glad to be on the show this evening. And so I know my featured guest for the night is in the queue, and he's waiting patiently. But we're going to go ahead and we're going to leap over our Shits and Giggles this evening, and we're going to go right up to our word up game and see how you fare with that. So
okay, sure.
Okay. Are you ready to play, Mark Bennett? Two N's and two T's. I
am ready to play, Michael Taylor Gray.
Okay. Our audience is all set. They're excited. They know that you're going to do well. This is a word-mind association game where I'll say a word, a name, or a phrase, and I ask my opening sidekick, which is you, Mark Bennett, to say the first thing that to mind. Okay. Shake it out.
Okay.
Loosen that jaw. Do some of your large warm-ups for us.
I will. Well, actually, I still have my producer hat on, so we don't know what's coming out of my mouth. So.
I love it. And that's exactly what the show's all about. Yeah. Okay. It's the unexpected coming out of your mouth. Here it goes. Or like a date for me on a Wednesday night. Oh, here you go. Paying it forward.
Well, the only thing I can say about paying it forward is exactly what Fred did for me, and what I get to in turn tell his story. So even 12 years after he passed away, my one word is book.
Yeah, I mean you are, and so is with this book. How do you look to pay it forward with the message that you have in this book?
Well, people have this understanding about with Entourage and all those shows. Hollywood likes to send itself up all the time and Swimming with Sharks and and you know what? I never saw anything like that and I believe there is a moat in Hollywood. There's, of course, just like in any industry, there's like the ham and eggers or whatever. And if you're lucky to cross the moat and get world, toe dip into Fred's world, you meet the most incredible, honest, sensible, won't screw you over people that have your back or will help you. And that is all I ran into, and I was lucky enough to toe dip in that world for a nanosecond. Because I didn't run into the Ari Golds, and I didn't run in, nor the agents or the managers of the people that we dealt with, or the publicists or whatever. They were all just, legendary, cool, laid back, what can I do for you type people. So it does exist.
Yes, but in the course of your book, I'll have to add to that, just to kind of counter that a little bit, just to let people know that that you did have the rug pulled out from you under you a handful of times throughout this process of you and Fred working to get the big show, tonight's unlikely program, to get that on air. So so there were it did balance itself out.
Yeah, but everybody was doing their job. It was nothing. There was no character. There was nothing like that. It was all business. It may not have favored me, or the show. But they have their people they got to answer to. We have our people. Everybody's got a boss we got to deal with. And sponsors and networks and board members and so forth, All we want to do is just get a bunch of people together and shoot it, but they have other responsibilities that we don't know about, and we have to honor that, And Fred was always very quick, like he would say, if they understood and got what we were trying to do, then they would be wonderful people. Remember that. So, and even the people that you thought were maybe your enemy, really in the big picture weren't. And I like that gray area, and I hope that gray area comes through in the story, because the people that I thought maybe could have been really weren't, and they really liked me, and they liked how I dealt with some of the problems that we had no control over. It just didn't work that way.
And with the idea of taking the forward out of the pay it forward, you your mindset always kept you moving forward, you know, as opposed to like looking at somebody as a roadblock and thinking in the negative, understanding and having respect and moving forward with that. So that's a really good lesson. Here's our next.
Plus, you know, Okay.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, plus the other thing, because being in Fred's world, yes, indeed, was a special world, and that is rare, too, in Hollywood. But some of those funny moments where you are looking at you from your third eye, after he passed away, we celebrated his life at Le Dome Restaurant in Sunset Plaza, a real old Hollywood restaurant.
Oh, yeah.
And when you walk in, the bar's on the left, and then the tables are on the right, and you walk through the tables, and there's an exclusive back room with an old-timer tinkling the ivories, playing jazz standards, and it's just a who's who of, you know, Tony Martin and Sid Charisse and George Siegel and Robert Wagner, who introduced himself to me as RJ, which cracked me up, and Jacqueline Bissett and Irving Fine and George Slaughter, who created Laugh-In, and all these, you know, just major Edie Wasserman, for crying out loud. So all these people. But anyway, I laughed to myself because these are things that I never thought I would hear in my entire life. I drive up to La Dome. There's a tank of a Mercedes in front of me, huge. And these two Beverly Hills ladies get out. I'm right behind them, and the valet takes my thing, and I get out. And so I'm literally behind them, and they're just right ahead of me. And we walk in, and we go down that line of tables. We hit the back room, and there's like a maitre d' standing there. And it was his job to announce the people that had arrived, which I wasn't expecting.
That's old Hollywood.
That's old Hollywood. So I don't know what's going on, but here's something I never thought I would hear in my entire life. I heard someone say, Barbara and Nancy Sinatra and Mark Bennett.
Wow. That's fantastic. That's fantastic.
I never thought I'd hear that.
Yeah. Mine would be like, you know, his next door neighbor and Michael Taylor Gray. I'm like, all right, fine.
Yeah,
okay, Mark.
I'm sorry.
No, don't apologize. I love it. So you walk into the room and you own it. That's fabulous. Wow. Well, it'll happen again.
Well, I don't know. Not in that kind. There's a very kind of special thing, and you know, I was still am the kid in that scenario with all those wonderfully talented and amazing people. I mean, Abby Lane was there. She was the lead singer for Javier Cugat's band. Okay, in the '40s. You know, it's like really, you just going really the whole time. So I'm sitting there, you know, not knowing what to do, and thank goodness for Shirley Fonda, who was Henry Fonda's wife. And it was really crowded in there, and we kind of backed into each other. And she goes, "Oh, we bumped butts," she said. And she said, "Are you with anybody tonight?" And I said, "No." And she goes, "Well, my husband's home, too, so you can be my date." So she was a wonderful person to, you know, introduce me or reintroduce me to all these people. Oh, this is Freddie's mentee, and da-da-da, you know, and then gossip about them, you know, or you know, somebody'd come in and she'd have gossip to tell me, and, you know, she was a real delight. It was really fun. So we're standing there kind of kibitzing, and who should be coming up to me but Ann Rutherford. And for those who don't know, Ann Rutherford was in the Andy Hardy movies with Mickey Rooney and Judy Garland. She was his sister. Yes. And she was also, and this is what was big to me, Scarlett O'Hara's younger sister in Gone with the Wind. Now, when do you think you would ever talk to anybody from Gone with the Wind, right?
Maybe one went with the wind if you were, you know, with Silver Net, but not Gone with the Wind. Yes.
Nice.
Oh, my
so
goodness. Yes.
Ann Rutherford comes, that's wonderful. Ann Rutherford comes walking up to me, and I'm still talking to Shirley, and I look in front of me. There's Ann Rutherford. She looks up at me, and she goes, "What a beautiful head of hair."
And ladies and gentlemen, you just got to know, even though you've got it shorter now than you did before, but Mark Bennett had the most gorgeous, full, curly set of hair. It was like, you know, like rock star length. Just fabulous.
Oh, yes. God. Well, thank you, Michael. Yeah. I appreciate it.
I used to have that hairline. Now I have to order it.
Right on. So
that was not an applause line.
Thank you. What have you? Yeah. And then I look at her, and I look around the room, of course, at everybody who's there, and I said, you know, I got to tell you, from the funeral to now, I just feel like I stick out like a sore thumb. And she looked at me, and she goes, "Darling, we're all staring at you because we wish we could still be you."
That's lovely. Oh, you cannot pay it forward, backwards, or around you or next to you for that. That's my God, Mark. Oh, I would love all of that for life. Okay. Now, our second phrase, this is another phrase in Word Up, leap of faith.
Oh, every day I had to make a leap of faith that it was going to work out, or what this decision I made was appropriate, so that it would not be a bad reflection on Fred, or because I was, I would go out first and kind of check it out, and then if it got important, we'd bring Fred in. But I just thought, wow, I don't want to, screw up, because then someone says, hey, who's that kid that's, trashing your name around, saying, making you look bad, So I'm like, well, and conversely, will he stick with me, because even though he said it, I'll be with you every step of the way. In the back of your mind, it's like, he's,
You're
really?
like, at some point, there's got to be a breaking point, right?
There's got to be a breaking point. He's going to throw up his arms. He's like, you don't know what you're doing. Of course I don't know what I'm doing. I've never done this before. So, yeah, leap of faith is what I did every day. So you're looking for a word or a phrase, and I gave you a story. I'm sorry.
That's fine. Well, Mark, you're a writer, so we expect words. Okay, here you go. Here's another one for you. You ready? No.
Lawsuits.
No lawsuit. Somebody tells you no. And how did somebody said no to you and a lawsuit ensued? Tell me a little bit about
what you do. All I know is that if Fred were around today and some writer was suing me, Fred would stand up from his desk and put his arms out, and he'd give me a big hug, and he'd say, now you're a producer.
Oh, that's fabulous. Here's your next phrase or word, Mark. Are you prepared?
Okay, I did the non sequitur. I don't know what I can do now, but all right, go ahead.
You are good. You are good to go. I have full faith in you. Fate.
Fate.
That was from the left. Fate.
Yes, fate. Well, the fate of just dumb lucking it. So, showing up at the Tonight Show unannounced and unwelcomed, and for some strange curative reason. And not thrown off the set.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. And you can't do that.
The fate of my life. Yeah, the fate of my life completely changed just from doing a dumb little thing like, let me go check out, Sting.
Mm-hmm. Why not? Why not? Okay, here you go. Self-doubt.
Oh, this is something Fred was artful at, but self-doubt happens every time you go into a pitch meeting, and you just want to get your point across, say it quick, and get the hell out of there. But while the feeling is still positive, Fred could hide that very well. That's somebody who plays poker very well. But
I'm not. I don't have the world's best poker face. You pretty much know how I feel. That's something. That would have to be a great acting moment.
So self-doubt, I can give you two words: good producer.
Good, exactly.
Which I'm not claiming to be that. I'm just.
Well, no, I would beg to differ. People, once people read The Big Show by Mark Bennett, 2 N's, 2 T's, at markbennettauthor.com, they're going to know. They're going to know. And this last word I think is appropriate, and I just want to see how you define it and how you react to this word: success.
Success, I think, and I was told this once, success is when you cannot discern between work and play. And that has no monetary value in it whatsoever. But if you can't discern whether it's work or play, and it's like, and I get money too, is like just sort of an after the fact, I think that's success.
Absolutely. And I'm going to tell you, even though the show, The Big Show, the production itself did not make it to air, your book is going to be a big show success. Okay, and as my producer knows, I love my sound effects, so you have to just bear with me. It's like I love them. I find every excuse I can to use them.
And special kudos for putting in the Tonight Show theme, Johnny's theme.
Oh, good. I'm glad you liked that. That was
that made me laugh. I laughed very hard, and that will never before or since will that happen to me with that theme. But thank you so much.
You're more than welcome. And with that in mind, I don't want to take it down that low. But anyway, Mark. the point is, thank you so much for being a part of the show. Thank you for sharing part of your story, and congrats on having your book published and getting it out there. And I'm thrilled that we're your first talk show to help you promote the book. And I just wish you continued success with this.
I appreciate it, and it was an honor being a part of your program. Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Take care. Good night, Mark.
Bye. Bye.
Well, that, ladies and gentlemen, that was Mark Bennett. And again, you can read his book. You can get his book, The Big Show, a true story about a newcomer and a Hollywood legend. Mark Bennett's the newcomer, and Fred de Cordova, legendary producer of 25 years of producing the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, is the Hollywood legend. So you can get it at markbennettauthor.com. And now, God bless him, our featured guest for the show tonight is, let's see if he is here yet. Oh my! I must be a psychic, because every time I expect our guests to arrive, the doorbell rings and Ted. Oh, Ted, what are you snickering about?
Is this thing on?
You? Is this thing on?
Is this thing on?
Yeah. Well, you're in the studio. It's really nice that you came in with your microphone already set up. You're very, very cordial and very thoughtful to do that. But as I was taught when I first was singing in cabaret, I was told, put your mouth close to the head and just
I have no problem
and
at
just
all
speak
with that.
clearly. Well, wow,
What was that?
I can tell, and apparently the audience doesn't either. So
all
thank
I
you so
needed
much.
was that euphemism. Thank you.
Right? You don't need any excuse to be as filthy-minded as me, right? So that's for sure, because we know how to get funky, we know how to get real, and we know how to get just real. I'm trying to. Oh my God! Okay, sometimes, ladies and gentlemen, I shouldn't drink before, during, or after a show, but. There it is. And isn't that an appropriate introduction when we're going to be talking about addiction? So, but sometimes you can laugh. Sometimes you got to be willing to make a joke, right? So,
yes, and of course, I'm prepared for that too. There was none of that, and there hasn't been for a while, and we'll get into that.
Yes. So now, as I do with all my guests, and as I do for every show, and by every show, this is my fourth show, and I've done it every time. So. Just to be consistent, Ted, I asked Ted to, Ted Mayberry is our guest tonight, and I asked Ted to submit a short bio, and with tonight's topic in mind. And I always find it fun to read the bio while my guests, when I first bring them on, and I like to read it aloud and use it as our jumping off point, because I always find it very revealing what people choose to share about themselves. So, and the tone that they use and all that. So let's see what Ted has to say about himself, and then we'll go from there. Are you ready, Ted?
I am ready.
Okay, you sound ready. Okay, here we go. Our featured guest, Ted Mayberry, and I put that in caps and bold letters, was born in torture. I know. Our featured guest, Ted Mayberry, was born and tortured in Canton, Ohio, until the age of 18. In 1985, he decided to hit the road and drive as far away as he could get from the gateway to the Midwest, and landed in San Diego, California, for 3 years to discover who he was. After not realizing the permanent vacation it was supposed to be. Now, Ted, you sit there and you be a quiet young man.
Right. I know.
I'm going to put you on mute for just a second, because I don't want you to distract me. Here it goes. After not realizing the permanent vacation it was supposed to be, he returned to Canton for more torture until he discovered the swarming metropolis of Columbus, Ohio, in 1990, where he was introduced to life as he wanted it to be by the world's best gift, MTG. Now, Ted, did I tell you to write that?
You probably hinted to it at some point in my past, but no, not this time.
You're supposed to say no. Oh, okay.
No, you would never do anything like that.
No, Ted. No, Michael, I did not tell you to write that. Okay, that was Ted sounding a lot like me. So, continuing. Ted and MTG chose different paths of settling as he remained behind in Ohio and truly discovered himself and his addictions of having a good time. He did, however, manage to get started on his long journey of a secondary education in chemistry. After losing his first long-term partner to cancer, he once again hit the road to San Diego in 1996 to continue his quest for happiness. only to find that it was still not the permanent vacation that he had started to search for 8 years prior and had not yet produced the elusive degree in chemistry. Returning once again to Columbus in 2008, where he currently resides, still in pursuit of his biochemistry degree, with only 2 semesters to go, he is currently blessed with a chemist position at the world's greatest adhesives company, is just a stone's throw away from completing his biochemistry degree, and is still living, learning, and perhaps maybe even loving the person that he's becoming, as he works through life's issues that he had often not realized in his younger days. So, Ted, thank you so much for kind of giving us an overview of, where you feel that your journey, I guess your adult journey in life began, your quest to go from Ohio to San Diego, and what was it about that journey to San Diego did you hope to find, and why did you choose that location?
Well, I mean, honestly, at first it was another high school friend of mine, and I were drinking one night, naturally. And what do you do when you're drinking? Well, you plan these exotic vacations, and both of us really naturally. What else do you do?
Right.
So we were planning this exotic vacation, this exotic breakaway from Canton, and we're just like, well, why don't we just drive to the West Coast? And we woke up in the morning and packed our stuff and just hit the road. So we were 18 years old at the time. So, it sounded like a good idea at the time. What else would you do when you're 18?
And for those who don't know Canton, and God love it, it's a great place to grow up. But, going to Columbus, like where you live now, that's an exotic vacation.
Yes, that is so true.
So, so San Diego must have seemed like Tahiti. So,
wow. Definitely so it was, because, 18 years old and never actually even being out of the state of Ohio, you're going out there to live a different lifestyle. And, that's part of my story is, coming out because, the circle of friends that I hung out with in junior high school, we always had that common frame of reference, but I never quite knew what it was. And, of course, then part of that, part of me escaping Canton was to go to San Diego and come out and just, be who I wanted to be, although it never really happened out there. So, that was a discovering part of the story as well.
All right, so it's part of discovering who you were, was sort of embracing your sexuality. Exactly.
And and what a person to be talking about with this. He has a story. He has a short story to tell you about my coming out story to him, and it's so endearing. I was so deathly afraid. I was so deathly afraid when I actually came out to him. And I'll let MTG take over for a minute or two on this one.
But me talk on my own show? Well, that's unusual.
How about that?
That's unusual. I don't know. Should I tell the story? Oh, okay. My audience insists. Okay. Well, as you know, it was interesting because, we go through life is challenging, and that's a big step to take. And with me, as you know, doing the show, I'm kind of out there, and I've always been kind of out there. And when I came out to you, I just kind of came out. I didn't make any bumps. It was pretty obvious. Yeah, I was like, oh yeah, you're like, really? But you were a little upset with me when I came out. I remember, and I think
goodness.
Yeah, and I didn't understand until later is because you were struggling with your own, embracing your own sexuality and how you wanted to be public about it and how if you felt that you could. But I remember it was my freshman year in college. I was at Bowling Green State University, and I was working in the student union, and I remember getting my mail, and you had written me a letter, and in that letter, you came out. And you came out. You said that you were gay, and all that. And at the end of the letter, you said, "After you read this, please destroy this letter." And and I remember going into the back, into the kitchen area, the dishwashing area and all that, back to the incinerator, and pulling the lever, and opening the big stone rolls up, and I held the letter for a moment, not doubting what I was about to do, but then I tossed letter and envelope, everything in there, and watched it burn, and and to respect your wishes. Part of me at this moment, and I've said to you in the past, kind of wishes that I had saved that letter, because it was such a personal moment, and it was just so endearing, and so it's something very special to me, and that you shared that with me. But I respected your instructions that you left in there, and I remember it, and I felt good that I did that, and I let you know that I respect your wishes. But that was something very, very special, and I was so relieved at that point too that you had taken that next step in your life. Now, did you send that letter?
And to me, that speaks volumes about how our friendship has always been. Any other friendship that I even currently have, it's not that I mistrust people. It's just that they would keep that letter and bring it up to me like 20 years later, saying, "Oh my gosh, remember this? This is how backward and how funny you were, and how much of an introvert. And isn't this so juvenile? But you burned that, and those are the things you've done for me throughout my lifetime, and I've always respected you for that, and trust you with my life. You're the person that I can always depend on, and I always will. And I feel that you can do the same for me. So, and
absolutely,
it took me a while to even trust that you actually did burn that letter, because I was waiting for the day when you would bring that back to me, and I would just I would pass out.
I go, aha! And I published it in the Canton Repository. That's the local newspaper in Canton, Ohio, as we call it, the Canton Suppository.
Yeah.
And I'm very proud of where I'm from. I'm not, we all make fun and all that, but it was a good place to grow up, and I'm thankful for that. I don't mean to belittle Bonhomme, but when we can make fun of ourselves, and I think that's part of it. And just to remind our audience who's listening in tonight, and this evening is going to be it's going to run a bit long, and if we go past 90 minutes, we go past 90 minutes. So what? And if our producer wants to go in there and extend the length of the show tonight so that it stays live, that's fine with me too. But when you have a full show as it is this evening, you don't want to, I figure people can tune out when they want to. But tonight's show, this segment, we are going to talk about addiction, and that's something that has touched both Ted's life and my life, both directly and indirectly, and that's part of the reason why I wanted to have you on the show this evening, because as I've mentioned, if you cannot have a conversation with anybody and be honest about it, to the gut honest about it, about something like addiction and the struggles that go along with it, if you can't have that conversation with your best friend, and by best friend I mean Ted and I have known each other for over 30 years. Which I can't believe, because I'm 25. And Ted's 80. I've always had friends older. What's that, dear?
We start regressing when we hit 40, so we're almost.
Well, good. I think I started regressing before you.
Yeah,
which which I didn't think that you would disagree with at all. So, and I just thought, when I approached you and you never even hesitated. So I really appreciate that, because doing this show, I think you realize this is something I've always kind of fantasized about, having my own talk show and doing it, and being able to share people that I find interesting, people that I take great joy in, whether I know them for a week, a year, 10 years, 30 years, 36 years, like with you and I. I take great joy in that, and I'm having the best time, and I want to take the kind of risk like we're doing with this evening and talk about addiction. So now the first time that you were in San Diego, you were there for, was it 8 years? You said?
No, the first time I was there for almost 3 years.
Almost 3 years. Okay.
It wasn't.
Almost 3 years, and then you came back.
The length of time I wanted.
Okay, right, and then you went back to Ohio. Now, during that 3 years in San Diego, did you experience any kind of issues with addiction?
Well, I was so young to it because I just thought that, when I turned 21 while I was out there, I had finally hit that milestone.
What happens on our 21st?
Well, the 21st birthday was, we can legally start to drink. Now, with me, it really wasn't as big a milestone as I had thought it would be, thought it was going to be, because I started drinking at a very young age, and God bless my mom. She was in my life to show us how to have a good time, and to break those chains that we were tied down with living with my father, because it wasn't a very good childhood. So at 8 years old, I had my very first drink, and that should have told me by the time I was 21 that, hey, I had been drinking since I was 8 years old. Not every day, but it was kind of.
You sure you're not a Barrymore?
Oh, I question that to this day. But honestly, you don't.
Yeah.
For me, it was like I was the man of the house, and it was okay for me to do that because I had to start helping take care of my two younger sisters, and so it was just a thing for me to do was to drink because the man of the house did, and the mother or stepmother and the father weren't there full time, so it was just not a big deal. And I bet you, even you, Michael, didn't know that, during that span from the time I was 8 until I was 21, that there were times when I had a beer or two, and I didn't go and announce it to the world because it wasn't a frivolity to me. It was just something that I was supposed to do.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I'll tell you, I don't ever remember you drinking as a kid. I don't remember ever seeing that. So, however that was hid. And I'll say, I loved your mom. Your mom, she had a great heart. And just to let our listeners know that, your mom struggled with addiction as well, and depression, and a lot of times those go hand in hand.
I am also blessed with that. It's what's called a dual diagnosis, and those out there in the recovery community don't know exactly what I'm talking about. Dual diagnosis means that you have been given the clinical diagnosis of being depressed or being bipolar, and also with some kind of addiction, whether it be drug addiction or alcohol addiction. Yes, I was given that gift of being diagnosed with being bipolar and also with alcohol addiction. So there you have it.
No, and I recognize that in you because there are, and the bipolar particularly, because you have those highs and lows.
I definitely do, and with me, it's more of the lows than the highs, but it's still very prevalent for people that know me as well as you do, and another handful of friends of mine still out in San Diego. They're probably listening now and saying, "Oh my God, that was it," because I haven't shared this with everybody. So it's very prevalent. It's very prevalent in the gay community. It's very prevalent in families of alcoholics and drug addicts.
Sure. Did you put the word out that you were going to be on the show tonight?
I sure did. I did.
Oh, good. Yeah, and good for you because, and again, I mean I think that takes some bravery to put that out there because this is not like we're talking about how we both love the latest fashions from Paris. Not that I could tell you what that is right now, but I mean this is something that may be like some people might go, wow, I didn't know that about Ted or that about Michael. But you know what? You realize that everybody has something that they're going through, and these last several years, I mean, there was all that talk about the Mayan calendar and the end of the world and all that. And what that really meant is that it was an end of an era. If anybody really has done their research on that whole topic, it's really about an end of a time, of an era. And we're going into a whole new phase of life and of the world. And I've noticed that there's so many changes that have been happening, so many divorces, so many deaths, so many people's pets have passed, and there's just so much going on, and that can be very difficult to deal with so much change all at once, and we don't always. Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, and we don't always deal with it in the healthiest of ways. So
that's exactly what I do, and the unhealthy ways to me were never really prevalent until I started to lose the things that I had lost, partners, and luckily I'd never lost any jobs over this, but I had my bout with the law, had a DUI, and when was your really DUI? Thinking about those things. My DUI was in 1999, and I was in San Diego at the time. And the law told me that I was not supposed to be drinking, and that was pretty much my bottom because to me that was being in jail for 3.5 days because I think that was a sign that I needed. They weren't going to release anybody on a holiday weekend, and that was exactly what I needed.
Yeah.
Right. So another.
And I'm like, oh, great. And let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, I love this man. I love I love Ted Mayberry. He's just the dearest person in the world to me. But, and it's just amazing the tenacity that you have, because if anybody has this cloud over them sometimes, I don't know why. It's like you're like Linus in the Charlie Brown, this cloud of dust or whatever, kind of just following you around. And like anybody else, there are people who've lost their license. It's been taken away from them like 38 times. They've had 38 DUIs, and yet they're out there still, right? But
yes, and that
the one time you get thrown in jail, and tell them what your punishment was and how long it was and how hard they came down on you.
Oh, goodness. And yet another latent blessing. My punishment was, and I'd even hired an attorney for this. It cost me thousands of dollars that, of course, I didn't have. But, I hired an attorney. My case took about a year and a half to settle. And I honest to goodness, I think that my judge she was getting over some kind of addiction herself. She had quit smoking. She was an alcoholic. She was on her cycle. I don't know what was wrong, but my punishment was I got a major fine. It was like $5,000. I got 5 years of probation. Now this is a first-time offense. And
first
as
time.
I'm talking with these,
and you have no prior record, right? No prior record.
No record at all whatsoever. I was in college. I was working full time. Mm-hmm. I mean, I was pretty much the model citizen, with the exception of that DUI and the drinking issue.
And how close to home when you got pulled over?
And of course, the thing where people say, yeah, I was literally like a half mile from home. No, honest to goodness, I was 3 blocks from my house. And at the time that the police were following me for a good mile and a half, and I knew the entire time they were following me that this was it. This was it.
Oh my God! I would have had to change my pants 3 times. But you were drinking and driving, and you got caught, and so you got literally the book thrown at you, and so you got a huge fine and 5 years probation, and what else?
5 years probation. I had 1,000 hours of community service work, and speaking with the other criminals. And it's even weird to even have to say that I'm talking with these other criminals, but they put you through a program where everybody just the state labels you as an alcoholic, but you're speaking with these other people that were the DUI offenders as well, and they're like, well, yeah, I got 100 hours and I got $1,000 fine. I'm like, why did this happen to me? I mean, it makes sense now why it happened to me, because it needed to. But it's just, it's really disheartening to understand.
That's really interesting. Yeah, because at the moment, I remember just when you kept telling me all this and this, all the fines and times and all the stipulations that were laid down of what you had to do and how much this was costing you. I mean, the lesson here is, as we would tell and you would say to anybody, is don't drink and drive, period. But to fit in tonight's discussion, and to think, what have you learned from that experience, and how do you get past addictive behavior, and for you to look back on it now and go, you know what, that severity of that had to happen. So you think that severity did that wake something up in you? How did you react to that?
Well, when I first started getting sober, it was in San Diego, and I was doing it because it was a required program. I had to start attending AA meetings. And it lasted for almost 8 years, and that to me, that was the introduction to the AA community. Now I'm gonna throw out a little caveat here. I do currently attend AA meetings, not as many as I should, but I still do it. But I'm not going to preach the program, because there's this thing about anonymity, and you have to follow their traditions, you have to respect their traditions. But that program saved my life back then. I was very lazy about working the 12 steps, and that's how you truly learn who you are and what your addiction is about. But so I was what was labeled in the community, the AA community, as a dry drunk. For almost that entire 8 years, I was going to meetings, but I wasn't getting the program. It was keeping me from drinking. Drugs were only a part of my past, so that was never a really small part of my past. But that was never an issue for me during this time when I was dealing with, labeling myself as an alcoholic.
Right.
But I was what they call it a dry.
A dry drug. So what particular drugs have you used?
You name it. You name it. And that part of my story is that after my partner passed away in 1995, you know, I needed to self-medicate. I mean, it was just the most god-awful thing for anybody that was, you know, less than 30 years old to have to deal with. And it was
so you reach out and you just kind of grab whatever's there sometimes.
I grabbed whatever was there. I had a lot of good friends. I'm putting the quote fingers up because those friends knew how much pain I was in and how much suffering I was in, and they wanted to help me, and you know, they gave me whatever. And you know, that part of my story was what really was when my drinking really took off, because I realized that if I stayed here in Columbus any longer, that I would probably be dead. And I realized that there's always been that self-awareness of mine that I didn't quite know how to handle it, but I knew that something was wrong. So I hit the road June 1st of 1996, and I arrived in St. Louis. It was my first stop along that journey, and I arrived at about 2:00 in the morning. And this is how sick my mind was at that time with addiction. I had you name it on me that was worth like thousands of dollars in drugs, and I never really enjoyed the things that drugs did. For me, it was always alcohol that made me the person I was back then. But I realized at that point that the revelation I had was just for a second. Yeah. When you say made you that person that you was, that alcohol did as opposed to drugs, what does that mean? That means I've always been a social introvert. I'm afraid of people. I still say to this day that I hate people, and it's not a literal hating of people. I fear people because I'm not really good at communicating with people. I'm not a social butterfly. That's where MTG, the love of my life, is very complimenting to me. That's why we've lasted for so long, because you're such a compliment to me. The audience adores you. And you have nothing to fear from them. Oh, I feel like a star. Oh my gosh. Yeah, but that makes sense. It's just that part of me. The alcohol really loosened my inhibitions, and I didn't have any. Once I had that first drink, it was off and running, and I became a completely different person, the person that I wanted to be. So that's what the alcohol. That's what I meant. The alcohol made me the person that I was. Mm-hmm. But you took drugs, but drugs just didn't have that. They weren't eventually the addictive part of your. They weren't the true addiction that you were going through, but they were part of that process. They were part of my story, yes. And I gave that up June 1st of 1996, and that was the last that I have done any drugs besides alcohol. And I thought to myself, well, I had that revelation. That was all flushed down the commode at that really, really nasty hotel room that I was in. And I wanted to go out so bad, and I went out and bought a 12-pack of beer, and I drank that. I drank that after driving for 14 hours straight. So, and the sick part of my addiction was that I justified my drinking by saying, when I got out to San Diego, I got my life back. I got my life back because there was a scare there with a failed HIV test, and that's a lot that I don't tell that to a lot of people as well. I had an HIV test that aired to the positive, so I thought, I'm going to go back. I'm going to go to San Diego. I'm going to live it up and die, and that's how I look at it. I'm going to live it up and die. And even though I had that revelation with flushing the drugs, because that wasn't going to be a part of my life. Right. The drinking took off, and I justified it by saying, well, you know what? It's my life. I'm here to party it up, and that's when it got really bad. And until 1999, that's what I did. So, for over 3 years, I was drinking and drinking and drinking, and things were okay to me because I was pretty much that survivalist where, and I was a functioning alcoholic, they call it. I didn't lose jobs. I didn't. You never missed a day of work. Yeah. No. You never showed up late for work. You were a functioning alcoholic. Very much so. So to me, I didn't have a problem. No, it's interesting that. No, do you think you were looking for an excuse to go back to that addictive behavior, and then that HIV test that you had, and the result, the positive result? Did you?
how do you look at that? Do you look at that as an excuse? Do you look at that as, okay, now I have a reason to not live? Or I mean, what? How do you look at that now in hindsight? How do you define your reaction and how you went, and then the addictive behavior that followed? How do you define that now? How do you look at that?
Well, I realized that, that addictive behavior that I had, I said to myself, well, back then I didn't know it was a problem. Now I know it was a problem because I wasn't looking at working through the issue of losing my partner. I wasn't looking at working through the issue of being addicted to alcohol, because I justified it and I made the excuse that, hey, I'm not doing drugs. I gave up drugs, so everything is good with me. And that's what we do. We justify. We justify being able to drink more because I'm in control. I haven't lost my job. I'm functioning. I'm going to college. And I know now that those 8 years that I was going to the meetings in San Diego and staying dry, being that dry drunk that I was, I know now what I should have been doing that would have helped me work through those addiction issues, because, if it wasn't the alcohol, I was addicted to something else. I was addicted to shopping. And you're saying, what? Addicted to shopping? How could that be destructive? Well, somebody like me that's bipolar, when I hit those manic phases, I would go out and spend, I would go out and spend this money that I didn't have and that I would never have. And I justified being able to do that and being able to not working through that addictive behavior. That to me was just another justification. I was making an excuse, and that was, I replaced my alcohol addiction with another addiction. And that's the vicious cycle that addicts have to suffer. So that's exactly how it works.
Yeah, with that in mind, because you and I we're both using. I found an interesting article that has a lot of information in a short article. It's called "Defining and Recognizing Addiction." It's from Examiner.com, September 19, 2010, and just to dovetail on what you were saying about, finding other sources of addiction to replace, some of the drinking and drugs and things like that. Under recognizing addiction, it says, nobody intentionally sets out with the outright goal of becoming addicted to harmful substances or behaviors. However, many people find themselves hopelessly addicted. The quicker a person can identify that there is an addiction problem, the more of a chance they have of effectively doing something about it. Here's a short list of some of the warning signs that indicate addiction. And I'll read through these and just have you sort of, add to them. The first one, I think you've already kind of pointed out, is to recognize addiction. Here is some of the warning signs. Here are some of the warning signs. Abandonment of social or occupational activities in order to engage in the addictive behavior, drug use, shopping, overeating, gambling. So did you find that you abandoned some of, interacting with people to go and do these addictive type behaviors instead?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. With the drinking specifically, and we'll start with the drinking. I was always the type of person that would go to a bar by myself. I didn't want to go with a group of people to be social because I was never that kind of an extroverted person. It took me drinking, a lot before I became that social person. But, abandonment of the social or occupational activities, yes. I definitely wanted to go to the bar by myself until I'd had enough to drink where I could be social. Occupational activities, sure. I mean, not specifically work activities, but other things like, I didn't end up getting into running and jogging or playing softball until my later years when I was that dry drunk. So I avoided, that kind of contact with the community and having those kinds of outlets for trying to work through my addiction. So yeah, I mean, definitely I isolated a lot. And I was always a good person by myself, and I always functioned well by myself until I had that one or two six packs, and then I became that different person. And I didn't find myself hopelessly addicted, or didn't think I was hopelessly addicted until until recently when I started thinking about those things. But I made those excuses to engage in that addictive behavior. And had it not been the alcohol, it was the shopping. It was I would go out and just buy things that, hey, I wanted the latest and greatest in computers or electronic equipment.
Sure.
Never had a problem with overeating or gambling, but yeah, there was definitely those patterns of the addiction replacement. So that is definitely very fitting for me. That definitely is.
Yeah, and I find that a commonality. And when I talk to friends who have dealt with addiction or depressive bouts of depression that can lead to same kind of behavior characteristics that you might see in addictive behavior, that sense of detachment. And that the abandonment of it's just going home and not wanting to go out, not wanting to hang out with friends. Just saying, yeah, I'll go to your party, and then just not going.
Right.
Just deciding to stay in for the night and making that choice more often than not. Another warning sign that may indicate addiction is the inability to abstain from using substances or engaging in damaging behavior despite the knowledge of its dangers. How do you feel about that?
Oh. And when you're addicted to alcohol, you think about, and before you're, at least my mindset, and I don't want to overgeneralize everybody, because we all have our own addictive behaviors and how we act out and how we try to keep ourselves from getting into that situation. But I always thought about, before I went out, okay, I'm going to do this to avoid getting a DUI. I'm going to do this to avoid, talking to this group of people. And as much as I wanted to abstain from using those substances to excess, I would go out to a bar with the intention of having like one or two drinks, and I realized after having that 12th drink that, that didn't happen. Well, hey, good for me. I'm having a good time. So what the heck? So you're just, after, a true addict has no concept of control. You're never in control of your disease. It's just you chemically your body changes once you get those.
But you're very aware of it, though. Don't you find that that's the most fascinating thing to me? Because my battle has not been it's been more with substance abuse than it has been with alcohol, and it's just in this sense of detachment, which I just find it oddly fascinating. Is that the sense of detachment that you have, while you're engaged in that kind of behavior, you know full well what the damaging behavior that it is, but yet you're still. It's like you're there and you're not there. It's just the oddest thing, and it's got nothing to do with my being a Gemini.
Right. Well, I have two or three other people inside my head. I'm a Libra, so I can justify just about anything. I can meld into any situation, and it's just me making another excuse to say, well, I know it's dangerous, but I'm having a good time and I deserve this. That is a big one. That's a big one with me. I deserve this.
That's a big. Give a round of applause for that. Oh my God! Yeah, I'm glad you brought that one up. And moving along here, another warning sign that can indicate addiction is extended amounts of time expended obtaining, using, or recovering from substance abuse or damaging behavior. Did you see a point where you found that time was sort of slipping away and you were it was taking a little bit longer you were to get or to use or to recover?
Yeah, definitely. With me, I will use trying to get my college degree for that. I've made every excuse in the book to give a reason for why I hadn't gotten my degree yet. And then I look back and say, well, that last year was a rough year for me, so I took a year off. And what did I do? I ended up going out a lot more and having a good time. And yeah, that was another excuse. I could have just kept going. And as tenacious as you and anybody else thinks I am, I've come to the realization that I just made excuses for taking time off and not keeping on going because it was just so difficult for me dealing with my depression and dealing with the alcoholism. So I would take time off and go and party it up and have a good time. They're all excuses, and that was a really hard realization for me. I wish I had been able to see that back then, because maybe now I would have my degree. I mean, I don't beat myself up about it so much anymore, but I know that being so self-aware of it, it's going to keep me from getting back into that mindset again. So yeah, I mean, definitely the amount of time that I spent trying to figure out if I'm going to finish going to school this year or I'm going to take a year off and have a good time, that it was definitely very unnecessary, and I realize that now. And just having that realization is something that I really truly wanted and I needed back then, and it just didn't happen. But it's happening now. So I look back on that and say that was another gift.
Yeah, of course. Now, when did you take your first college course? When did you start your educational journey? I'm asking for a specific reason.
Mm-hmm. My first college course was at University of California. I know, and I'm embarrassed by telling people this sometimes.
No, this is not to embarrass you. This is not to embarrass you, but this is, like I said, again, kudos to you for opening up your heart, your mind, and your spirit tonight and sharing your story, because I think this is a very important story, and I think this is going to speak to others. And if you can take this step and share all this information so freely with me, that you're giving me the greatest gift, and I want you to get something from this too, as well, Ted, because this is important, and nothing will be more special and more joyous to me than when I'm at your graduation and I see you get that degree, because I'm telling you, I will be there. But I want people to understand the breadth and the depth of what you've been going through and what you've been dealing with. So you took your first college course in what year?
It was in 1987.
Okay, and, 1987.
Can you believe it? That was 3 years after I graduated high school. Yeah. I don't know about you, Taylor Gray, but I graduated in 1984.
Well, I did as well, but I was transported to that time, and so now I haven't aged. Like the portrait of Dorian Gray, if you know that. I'm timeless. So yes, we did graduate at the same time, Ted. But as you know, I've stopped aging.
Yes, and I think I've slowed down the aging process. Yes, definitely. So yeah,
you have as well.
1987. Now, here's what I had, and here's what I was given back then in 1987. I was accepted in the pre-med program at University of California, San Diego. Now, the UC school system is not an easy college to get into. I graduated high school with a very respectable GPA. I had a 3.7 GPA, so I had pretty much the world in front of me. I had really great financial aid package that I was given by the state of California. I was working a full-time job. I wasn't drinking a whole lot back then, but that was just the start of my drinking career. But again, my addictive behavior told me that, okay, this is too hard. I'm going to hold off on finishing my degree here at UC San Diego because I want to enjoy life a little more. And how many years later now I don't have my degree yet, and I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that to beat myself up in any way. No. I used to.
I find it interesting that you say drinking career. That was an interesting choice of words. I find that very interesting. But yeah, so 1987 is when you took your first class, and you plan you're 2 semesters away. So what year are we looking at for you to get your degree?
I will graduate spring of 2014. But let's hear it, folks. 2014.
That's right. My audience they're so thank you. They were rapt attention. They were leaning forward in their seats, and they were sitting on their hands and looking just so intently. But now they're such they're lovely people. I'm really lucky to have them.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that acknowledgement.
Absolutely. They're so generous. Now, and so let's total that up. So 1987 to 2014, that's 27 years. 27 years.
Can you believe it?
I know. 27 years you've been, getting bit by bit, getting your degree. But understanding in talking about it this evening is that, that's filtered through, those 27 years are filtered through battling depression, being double diagnosed, as you said, with battling with addiction and the bipolar issues. I mean, and you've done in your classes overall, your grades have been really good. So I don't know. I don't think you have anything to be ashamed or feel guilty or you know. I know that you don't necessarily hold your head up high and say, I've been going to school for 27 years. But, you know, the point is you have never given up. That's how I look at it, you know. And so...
I have finally surrendered to that too. And like I said, until recently, I used to really beat myself up over it. And I used to say to myself, you know, or make myself feel guilty, like, how could you have done those things, and how could you have wasted so much time? And that's very common in the recovery community, because when people start to realize that they've wasted a lot of precious years doing that, that's when it really hits them. I mean, and that's not everybody's revelation, but when you really think about the years that you've spent wanting to have a good time, and then really and realize that it wasn't such a good time, you know, then you really start to take a step back and look at saying, well, you know what, I need to finish this, I need to do this, I need to finish my college degree, and I need to feel proud of myself so that I don't get myself back into that vicious cycle of, you know, just saying, it's okay, I'm just here, I just want to have a good time, I deserve it. So, you know, there are a lot of things to beat yourself up about. But.
Yeah. Now, going back to this article in this section where they're defining addiction, they give 3 statements that they feel in this article from Examiner.com that where addictions have a few devastating similarities that they feel that everybody can pretty much agree to. The first one they state is that addictions separate an individual from reality. How do you feel that applies to you?
I mean, definitely so, because, you know, my reality was that I have a tendency to take things very personally. I get depressed, and the next thing I want to do is go out and drink. Now, any other rational person that doesn't have an addiction issue would say, okay, well, you know, let's work through these issues. Let's not go out and self-medicate, because it's going to throw me deeper into depression, or the consequences are going to be something that I'm not going to be able to deal with. And that's that separation from reality, because you just want to do the quickest and easiest, not exactly the cheapest thing, but whatever you want to do that is just so quick and easy to escape that reality. That's all that you're really doing. You're wanting to get out of yourself. So definitely escaping that reality is very prevalent. That is definitely true with me.
Yeah, and it's a temporary high, or a temporary escape. I mean, that never quite sits with somebody who's addicted.
Yes, and I never had the issue. I never had the problem with. I was a binge drinker, so I wasn't one that had to drink every day, because I had a job to go to, and I had a class or 2 to take. So, you know, I was good in that aspect. But I can definitely tell you, it was always on my mind. I was looking forward to that weekend, because Thursday, Friday, Saturday come around,
So you were a responsible drunk.
Yes, I was a responsible, miserable drunk.
Wow! And so you wouldn't drink like before a class?
Oh, well, sometimes, yeah, but it wasn't a daily thing. But, you know, there were times, and
sound effects, I had to throw one in.
Sometimes that did happen. Yeah, it did happen sometimes. But you know, even when I think about that too, it's just like, you know, how dumb is that I have to have a drink before I'm going to do something that's going to require me to focus on. You know, it just doesn't make sense, and that was just not reality.
But you did find that there were times that you did do that. Were you ever drunk when you took a test?
Oh, no, absolutely not. Remember, I was that functioning alcoholic now.
Okay. No, it's really I think important to look at all aspects of it and see what your particular situation was, you know, and how you reacted and how you dealt with things. Now, another definition that they feel that people can agree to in terms of defining addiction is that addiction can inflict significant damage to the addict immediately or over time. What immediate damage do you think that you experienced, and over time, what do you think? What have you noticed?
Well, always the immediate damage to me was that I would immediately feel guilty when I wake up in the morning thinking about those unsavory things that I got myself into. That was the immediate damage. Not only psychologically, but physically. What was I doing to my liver? What was I doing to myself? And I always kept in pretty decent shape, so I didn't have anything to worry about. And that, again, couples with that escape from reality, like thinking, oh, this is never going to affect me like it has affected my mother or my father or anybody else that I know. That immediate damage was that I felt even worse about myself, and that was so much more devastating to me because I already felt bad about myself. So and it didn't make sense to me that I should stop drinking as much because it was making me feel worse about myself, because the whole point of it was for me to feel better about myself. Well, yeah. So and then the overtime, I just realized that it was progressing and getting worse and worse, and I was going to end up getting a DUI if I wasn't careful, and then bam, that happens. So yeah, immediately and over time both. I was blessed to not have to deal with the physical devastation that a lot of alcoholics do. I never went through withdrawal, and I never had the detoxing that a lot of people have to go through that are really bad alcoholics. So to me, it was okay because I didn't have to go through that. So again, I was justifying being okay to drink the amounts that I was, because I wasn't like anybody else. I wasn't having those problems. So definitely the overtime and immediate.
So kind of rationalizing, say, well, at least I'm not as bad as so-and-so. Mm-hmm. Do you find yourself doing that as well?
Yeah, the rationalizing, again, it's just making excuses. Yeah. And one of my roommates now, who's grown very close to me over the past month and a half, he was asking the other day. He had mentioned that one of the meetings that he went to, they were talking about rationalizing, and my answer wasn't quite what it needed to be. And again, at that point, I realized also that I was making another excuse. Rationalizing means that you're trying to convince somebody else that what you're doing is okay. So it's just kind of
you're looking for permission to do it. Now, the third point that they bring up about addiction is that addiction often damages others that are close to the addict. Who do you feel in your life was damaged by your behavior?
Well, let me start that one with I always thought I was safe because I never had people that I realized were really good friends to me outside of you. And honest to goodness, the entire time I was in San Diego, I didn't realize that there were those few other people besides you that I knew would always be there for me. So I thought that keeping my social circle really small would decrease the damage that I could do to others by my drinking. But I came to realize that when those few other people that are still very close to me out in San Diego, they would mention to me, hey, you look kind of bad. Did you have a rough night? And that's the kind of hurt that you put other people through because they worry about you, or the people that you have to call whenever you're stranded. And I mean, who in their right mind would think it's okay that you're calling a friend at 2 or 3 in the morning because you can't find your car, or you're so drunk that you don't know where you are. I mean, and how rational is that? So I mean, that's very damaging. You're using those people, and you don't realize that you're doing that unless
they needlessly worry about you.
And they do, and that's
we're
kind of
fortunate that people care. Exactly, and you're fortunate that people care at all, and you're damaging that trust, and you're damaging that love, and you hope and pray that you have that you have a core of friends who will stick by you, but you don't have to take that risk,
Right, and it's hard to see that when you're suffering. Human nature says when you're suffering, you just lose touch with reality, because then at that point you're the only person that's suffering. When when indeed those other people that are asking you, about, about your previous night, because you obviously look like, you slept in those clothes and you smell like beer, obsession, and regret. So, those...
Which is the latest scent in the grunge culture. So it's funny that you should bring that up, because, in fact, that particular scent is our sponsor for tonight's show. So I'm glad that you brought that up. That was a nice shameless plug by Ted. That was beer, obsession, and regret. Or that could be a country song too. Look for it on shelves at a store near you. Yes, and you bring up really good points, because one of the things they all say in the article is that addiction can be very subtle, and often the addict does not realize that he or she has become addicted. So defining and recognizing the face of addiction is the first step in resolving this growing problem. And I think telling your story, defining your story, revealing the face of your particular your particular journey with addiction, and also some of the emotional and issues that you've dealt with, depression and bipolar and all that. And it's important to define those and put a face to those, because somebody out there listening now, or when somebody listens to the recording of the show tonight, hopefully it'll speak to them and they'll recognize something in themselves, and they'll reach out and get the help that they need. So, like you said, AA is one of those places they can go to. Are there any other particular organizations or places that you would recommend to people from your own personal experience?
Well, and another group meeting that I've been going to lately is Al-Anon, and that's specifically for family and friends of people who are dealing with an addict. I had always shied away from doing that, because I thought that since I'm working the program now, that I know how to deal with people that exhibit that kind of behavior. And when indeed I'm finding out that it's a whole program in itself when you you try to work steps yourself in how to deal with an alcoholic or a drug addict, and it's a whole different realm of the addiction process, because that person that's dealing with an alcoholic or a drug addict, they realize at some point that they're so codependent on that alcoholic and the addict that they just justify that behavior, and they just let it go, and it's okay. So both realms of the addictive process, are taken into account. So Al-Anon is something that I would highly suggest to somebody that's struggling with living with, being with, or supporting somebody that's an addict as well. It's I've just started that journey too, and I'm going to continue, because that's definitely my friends now in the recovery community are somebody that I want to be able to relate to as well. So
I'm glad that you mentioned Al-Anon. I'm really glad that you mentioned that, because we're all, there's everybody who's listening, and everybody out there, everybody we know has dealt with, either personally, directly, or indirectly. There's somebody in your family, there's a friend who deals with addiction, whether it's alcohol, drugs, and or dealing with depression or some kind of emotional and chemical imbalance, perhaps within their brain that needs to be addressed. So nobody is free and clear from this. So I think that's a great organization for you to bring up. So I'm glad that you mentioned Al-Anon.
Yes.
I want to segue now, and when we segue on the OMTG show, we always have that magical harp moment. Yes, and this is our Chapter 12 moment. I think this is a good time to ask this question of you, and to note that by Chapter 12, I call this segment that for a reason. A good friend of mine, David, he'll say phrases, and they always sound like chapters in a book to me, and he'll say something like Chapter 12, So I thought, well, that kind of relates to our lives. Our lives are like chapters in a book. So, Ted Mayberry, what is the title of your current life chapter? Where are you at this point in your life with dealing with addiction? So what would you title this chapter?
Ooh, that's a good one. It's so new to me. I just don't know what to say. I've actually thought about this. I have a stack of journals that hopefully someday I'll be able to publish. And I always thought a good title for me was. I always thought a good title for me or for this book would be "What Time Is It in Heaven?" Now, let me kind of explain that.
No, I didn't hit that button. Oh, yes, I did. No, I like it. I think, what is our audience? Is the audience like that? Yes, they do. I just love that trombone fail cute so much. So say that title again.
What Time Is It in Heaven? What Time Is It in Heaven?
And why that particular title?
Well, I started thinking about that when my mom passed away in 2005. And that was at a time of my life when I was still working on staying sober, and things were just becoming so horribly wrong with my life. I was miserable. I was so unhappy. I had just left a job on my own volition, and there were a lot of things that psychologically with me were not making sense. And I was so afraid that when my mom died, I would never ever get to see her again. And I always thought that, once I do get to see her again, and I mean until I get to see her again, I'll always wonder what time it is up there and what she's doing, because God love her, she wasn't the most religious of people, and she lived pretty much a sordid life, and I always thought that because of the Southern Baptist upbringing that we so dearly loved.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for some really odd sound effect.
Yeah, that we so truly our Northern Baptist upbringing, but nonetheless that makes you want to run screaming like the wind. Yes. Yeah.
So continuing with that, I always felt that until she actually passed away, I always had this fear that those people that were near and dear to me, I would never end up seeing again, because I was baptized and I was saved, I was going to heaven, and some of them I know weren't, and I was always afraid that I would never get to see them again. And my mom was a true example of somebody that she didn't follow any particular type of religion, so I was really sickly worried that I would never see her again. And I always wondered, what's she doing now? What time is it up there? And that title just spoke to me. It takes a long segue to be able to get to understand what that's about. But I think it's just always wondering, am I going to see these people again? Because I have lost those few people that meant so much to me, and I was always afraid that they weren't going to be forgiven for all of those sins that that we're also guilty of, and have to repent before we can get our life back. Blah blah blah. So, what time is it in heaven? Look for it on your bookshelves. Hopefully in the next 10 to 15.
That's right. And your for how much will it be? $9.99 this week, only $9.99. Yeah, and so your mom's up there, and she's playing that dream harp. She's playing that dream harp. So, and speaking of, and that's always our segue cue right there, going into our next segment. We're going to move right along, because we are just, wow, this is a marathon show tonight. I guess I'm trying to be like the Stephanie Miller show and be a 3-hour show. So this is our Just the Tip segment. So we're going to segue into our Just the Tip segment. I want to thank you so much, Ted, for sharing your story, and I know that it spoke volumes to me, and I'm so glad that we had a chance to talk about that. And I hope that others who are listening in, and perhaps those who are also struggling with any level of addiction or any kind of depression or any kind of chemical imbalance within your brain, please, reach out and ask for help. There is help out there. And I'm hoping that perhaps we can put some of the organizations that we've mentioned online here at our blog at lnrradio.com. And then how can people find you, Ted, if they want to? Are you on Twitter? Do you have a handle on Twitter?
I'm not on Twitter. I'm somewhat of a neophyte when it comes to Twitter. I do not do that. But if anybody wants to get in touch with me, I can have MTG. You can post it, or just my email address, tedsbox, TEDZBOX at yahoo.com. I'd be more than willing to share more of my story, or just bounce things off of me. I find it's much easier for me to communicate that way instead of talking to one-to-one.
And you're on Facebook too, so they can look you up on Facebook as well, right?
Look me up on Facebook, yes, Ted Mayberry. You'll find me there. But feel free. giving back to the
and
community. That's my way of doing it.
If something comes for me, I'll send it on to you as well. So thank you for being open to that. So now for our Just the Tip segment, and by Just the Tip, this is a how-to moment where Columbus, Ohio chemist Ted Mayberry and I will give you just enough info to get you started. Now, after all, we're entertainment prostitutes. We're not whores. We don't just give it all away for free. Thank you for not saying anything, Ted. When we say
Speak
just
for
the
yourself.
tip, right, exactly. When we say just the tip, we mean it most days. Our featured show tip tonight are the top 10 signs you're from the Midwest. And this, oddly enough, like our addiction, defining and recognizing addiction, this information also came from Examiner.com, which I find really fascinating that they would have the top 10 signs that you're from the Midwest as well as information on addiction. Not that they go hand in hand. So here are the top 10 signs that you're from the Midwest. Number 1, you can dress like you're from New York City or L.A., but as soon as you open your mouth, everyone will know exactly where you're from. Now, I think that's pretty true because you're like, yeah, can I have some pop? Or you wash your clothes or you eat potatoes. Or you walk across the room.
In 1985, I became the biggest redneck ever that lived on the West Coast. It was so obvious.
Right. I know, and okay, number 2, Ulta, Sephora, Nordstrom's, more like Walmart, Shopko, and if you're lucky, Walgreens. Now, you're lucky because you live in one of the few real metropolis or sort of cosmopolitan cities of Ohio. Not that it has a lot of cosmopolitan to it, but Columbus is pretty. It's got some real stores. I think you have a Nordstrom's there, though, right?
We do, yes.
Okay, so you're up.
But we also have our share of the Walmarts and the Walgreens.
Thank you. So. That's right. And number 3, one of my favorites here, you have to shop at a thrift store a few towns over, or everyone will recognize whose clothes you're wearing. Again, we're dealing the top 10 signs you're from the Midwest. Number 4, a day at the beach requires taking a hike through the woods, avoiding poison ivy, finding a dirty river, and jumping in before the mosquitoes eat you alive.
Oh, Lord.
Which I think we did as kids. I did in Canton, Ohio. I believe we did that as children. So number 5, another personal favorite, after a night out, you have to hang your coat outside because it reeks of bonfire. Again, ladies and gentlemen, these are the top 10 signs you're from the Midwest. Number 6, best part of winter, no one noticing is if you fall off your healthy diet and exercise routine for a while. Now, is that true?
Oh, that is true all year round. Are you kidding? Winter?
Oh, exactly. Number 7, no one goes outside in neutral colors during deer hunting season. Now, having grown up in a house that had a bunch of rifles in the cabinet right behind my parents' bed rest, I can attest for that. Number 8 of the top 10 signs you're from the Midwest. If you're in dress clothes, then you work at a bank, you're getting confirmed, or someone's getting married or buried. Number 9. During citywide garage sale days, you know who has the best deals and map out your route accordingly.
Oh.
Now, right, that's my mom and her best friend Kay. Oh, that's for sure. And number 10, I love it. The top 10 signs you're from the Midwest. Number 10, pageant princess, no thanks. Dancer, not you. If there's no chance of getting kicked, elbowed, or scratched, where's the sport in that? So, again, ladies and gentlemen, this is our top, Just the Tip segment. Tonight's featured tips for top 10 signs you're from the Midwest. And if you go to Examiner.com, there actually are 100 signs you're from the Midwest. These were just the tip of the iceberg. So with that in mind, we're going to segue into our one of our final segments. I think I'll end the show with just music since we just have 10 minutes left, and I'll read my little segment from an excerpt from the G-Man magazine another time. So let's end with some music because I think that's a good way to end this evening. This is our Jukebox 5 segment, Ted Mayberry, and I put on my artistic blinders and I grabbed 5 musical artists to share with our guests and our listeners. And of the 5, one of the songs is from you that you suggested, and one is from our top of the show sidekick, Mark Bennett. So we're going to start off our Jukebox 5 segment here with Mark's choice, and then we'll discuss it right after we hear it. Here it goes. Wow, I had to stop that. Because
thank you.
I know that George Gershwin wasn't drunk when he was doing that. I gave him nothing to drink. That is Rhapsody in Blue, and normally it doesn't sound like somebody's sitting up and down on the record, but that is Rhapsody in Blue is a musical composition by George Gershwin for solo piano and jazz band written in 1924, which combines elements of classical music with jazz-influenced effects. Probably one of the most well-known, I think, classical jazz pieces in the world. Commissioned by bandleader Paul Whiteman, the piece received its premiere in a concert entitled An Experiment in Modern Music, which was held on February 12, 1924, in Aeolian Hall, New York, by Whiteman and his band with Gershwin playing the piano. And at that time, nobody was sitting on the band or the piano. So I don't know why. I was like, whoa. But it was like my record player was broken. But that's Rhapsody in Blue. And you're familiar with that piece, are you not, Ted?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Okay. Yeah, thank you,
Mark, for adding that. Yes,
yeah, Mark. And Mark, I apologize for. I don't know. Wow. Okay, here we go. And so, in line with that, this next song is a choice that I've thrown in, and the three songs that I've contributed this evening have to deal with the time. What I'm going to say, these all are pretty much like from 1984-esque, Ted, and they relate directly to that time in our lives. So here's my first contribution, and we'll talk about it after.
Pull the strings of emotion, take a ride into unknown pleasure. Feel like a child on a dark night, wishing there was some kind of heaven. I could be warm with you smiling. Hold out your hand for a while. The victims, you know them so well, so well.
Okay, I think our DJ's on downers tonight, and I think that's highly inappropriate given the topic that we had that we were discussing earlier. But you know that song. Can you tell us what the name and the band who sang it?
Well, that was "Victims" by Culture Club, and it almost immediately brought tears to my eyes. Almost immediately, and it to this day,
it's a beautiful song. Yeah, and interesting, a little bit about that song. It was from Culture Club's album Color by Numbers, released in 1983. And as with most of their early singles, the song is about Boy George's then publicly unknown relationship with drummer John Moss. Now, the single was not released in the United States, Canada, or Japan, where they released Miss Me Blind instead, which was a big hit for the band. Reportedly, the record label Epic felt that the song was too depressing to be a single. And I didn't know that until, when I found that out just recently, because I always thought that song was one of the most beautiful songs that they ever recorded, and it was just haunting to me. I didn't find it depressing at all. I thought it was haunting and just beautiful in the orchestration and everything, and it does. It always would make me cry, but I don't find that depressing, But interesting that is what the record label thought. And but yeah, I have the same reaction that you do. And I chose that song because, the title, we don't have to be victims, You can spend that 5 minutes feeling bad about what's going on, live in it because it's real. But like I tell myself and I tell my friends, don't treat those down moments and those issues that are holding you back, don't treat them like palm olive. Don't soak in it. You know?
Exactly.
Yeah. So on that note, we're going to go into the next song, which is the third of our 5 songs this evening, and this is your contribution, and it's titled "Get a Little High" by Robbie Williams, and we'll talk about it after.
You don't know what to tell them, 'cause you don't know where you've been, and you've been there so many times before. It's only natural to feel like you're thinking. It's only human to be so unprepared. Don't worry, baby, if you get a little high, it's just a space to get you through getting by. So you get a little restless, and you get a little wasted. It's just a little light entertainment. Embrace it. It might just save your life.
Wow.
Interesting. You know, "Get a Little High" is by Robbie Williams. He's a UK artist. That song is from his 5th studio album released in 2002. It's only on the American edition of the album, "Get a Little High." It was not on the UK edition, and he, at the time, I think he was paid like £80 million to record. He had was the highest paid recording artist of that time, and may still be to this point. And you chose that song. Obviously, it speaks to what we were talking about a little tonight. But the lyrics, I mean, what is he talking about? Is he talking about get a little high just because, just to escape the moment? It might just say, because it's interesting, he says it might just save your life.
Absolutely, and it's in a metaphorical sense, and it's not in the literal sense. In a metaphorical sense, to me, getting a little high means going out to see a movie. It's going out to sitting at the coffee shop by yourself and just watching people, or just playing on the internet, just doing nothing. Getting a little high is very metaphorical to me. Not drinking, not doing drugs, but do whatever it is that gets you high. That's not going to be devastating to yourself or to your addiction. So, and those little things, and strangely enough, those shopping sprees that I went on, that I shouldn't have, but those things. Doing those things literally did save my life, and to me that was the much more rational and logical choice than going out and actually getting high, doing drugs or drinking. So there you have it.
So now you're taking it and making it more of a metaphorical high and having it actually benefit your life. So that's great.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
that's great. It's like it's like those words, those damaging words out there. There's certain words that we don't speak, like the N word or the F word for gay people, and all that. It's like we want to take the power out of those words. We want to take them and put them on their head, and so they don't have that kind of damaging effect. So I love that you're doing that with that sense of what get a little high means. So that's great. Now this next song. Will bring back some memories. And our producer, when we were listening to the tracks earlier this evening, he likes this too. And considering that he's 25 and that he knows the song, I'm thrilled. So, this is a great song, and there's a little story that goes with it. So let's listen to it.
I close my eyes, only for a moment, and the moment's gone. All my dreams pass before my eyes, a curiosity, dust in the wind. All they are is dust in the wind. Same old song, just a drop of water in an endless sea. Oh.
Now, you remember that this was we were sixth grade.
Sixth grade.
And we had been friends. Sixth grade, yeah. And you had moved. We had attended a grade school in 4th grade, but we didn't really know each other then. But you remember me because you remember me talking about this house that I was moving to. And then 2 years later, in 6th grade, you moved to that neighborhood, and we ended up going to the same school. And that's when we got to know each other and became best friends. So it was during that 6th grade year that I remember coming to you, to your house, and going, "Oh, Ted, Ted." I said, "Ted, they're doing a talent show at school, and I have an idea. I love that song, Dust in the Wind, by Kansas. Now, I'll sing the lead vocals, and you and Candy, your older sister, you guys can sing backup." And do you remember your response? Besides the sheer terror in the eyes that you had? Like, oh.
It's probably pretty much what I'm doing now. I'm laughing. I'm holding my chest. But
yeah, like, oh. Well, I mean, was I close or what?
I think I was probably more excited about wanting to do that back then. But being that that introverted person that I was, I didn't want to hear anybody hearing me sing "Dust in the Wind" with this little crazy social butterfly extroverted guy.
What was I thinking? What was I thinking? I'm like, wow, because I loved pop music so much, and I would take my little transistor radio out into the family room and close the doors from the kitchen and from the living room area and be out there all by myself, and I would listen to the top 40 for when it was 4 hours long, and write it down. So I did the very same thing. I got in trouble for listening to the Casey Kasem top 40 under my blankets at night when I was supposed to be sleeping. Yeah. Oh my God. Well, "Dust in the Wind" was by Kansas, was first released on their 1977 album "Point of No Return," and "Knows" is spelled Know. The song peaked at number 6 on the Billboard Top 100 the week of April 22nd, 1978, making it Kansas's only top 10 Billboard 100 charting single, which I didn't know. But, wow. Yeah, so that was good. But the pièce de résistance, ladies and gentlemen, because now we have officially gone 2 hours and 1 minute for the show tonight. But I don't care, because it's our show and it's our time, and we're having a good time. So thank you for those who may be still listening, all 2 of you, besides my lovely producer, I love him. So anyway, here we go. This is a pièce de résistance, and you'll definitely have something to say about this.
The hip hopper, you don't stop. Rock it out, baby, rubber to the boogity bang bang, the boogie to the boogity beat. Now what you hear is not a test. I'm rapping to the beat, and me, the groove, and my friends are gonna try to move your feet. You see, I am Wonder Mike, and I like to say hello. Up to the black, to the white, the red, and the brown, the purple, and yellow. But first, I gotta bang bang, the boogie to the boogie. Say up jump the boogie to the bang bang boogie. Let's rock. You don't stop, rock the rhythm that'll make your body rock. Well, so far you've heard my voice, but I brought 2 friends along. And next on the mic is my man Hank. Come on, Hank, sing that song. Check it out.
That is Rapper's Delight by the Sugar Hill Gang, and that was considered the song that popularized hip-hop in the United States. It's ranked number 251 on the Rolling Stone magazine's list of the 500 greatest songs of all time, and number 2 on both About.com and VH1's 100 greatest hip-hop songs. And it is also, interestingly enough, I thought this is very, very interesting, it is also included in NPR's list of the 100 most important American musical works of the 20th century. And the song was recorded in a single take. So that I didn't know. I mean, even NPR listed as one of the 100 most important American musical works of the 20th century. Wow. And we sat in your bedroom with the 12-inch single doing what? Nothing untoward.
We were memorizing. Oh, goodness, no. We were writing down the words and memorizing those words, and we were doing it in one night. Talk about that one take. We were doing it. It was done.
We were committed. And back then, our harmless addiction was listening to music and trying to learn all the words to Sugar Hill Gang. Oh my God, Rapper's Delight. Yeah. So, but speaking of delight, Ted, thank you so much. 2 hours and 4 minutes into this, you were so patient at the top of the show. I was having such a lovely time sharing Mark Bennett's book, The Big Show, which is about his relationship, friendship with Fred de Cordova, who's a legendary producer in Hollywood, produced for over 25 years The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. And Mark has just published his book, The Big Show. It's available at markbennettauthor.com, and we'll put that information on lnrradio.com as well so that you can see it, or you just contact me through Facebook and I can remind you about that. So it was great to have him on the show, and thank you, Ted, for opening up your heart and having such an open mind and spirit and sharing your story and your journey and where you are with addiction, because I think just by sharing it, you've helped me, because I've battled with my own issues, as you know, and I know that others out there have and are at this time. So it really means a lot to be able to share this time with you on OMTG. I want to thank our show's producer, Christopher Taylor, our top of the show sidekick again, the Big Show author, Mark Bennett, and our Columbus, Ohio chemist, I love calling you that, and soon-to-be graduate, Ted Mayberry. For more information about our shows, our sidekicks, our guests, and topics, just go to lnrradio.com. And remember to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and share with everyone you know. Thank you for tuning in to OMTG on the LNR Radio Network. We are broadcasting live every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. It's our date night, and so with that, I won't say I'll bring the wine this time since we talked about addiction. So it's our date night. Join us. We'll have some great conversation. We'll cry a little. We'll laugh a little, but we'll have a good time. Good night, everybody. Thank you so much. Take care, Ted.
Good night, America.